Hello, everyone. My name is Josh Swihart. I'm the Senior Vice President of Growth for the Electric Coin Company. I'm excited to have you here. We've got a full team here to answer questions that you guys have logged into Slido. The link should be there on the YouTube channel. So if you have additional questions as we kind of roll through this, and we have time at the end, we'll try to take as many of those questions as we can. So look, it's been an amazing year. We're so happy you're joining us now. We thought rather than do a normal Q4 live stream, we'd give you the opportunity to answer questions. But just to reflect on a couple of things, this year the community voted on a new dev fund. The MGRC was created and formed and elected and came up with a new name, the ZOMG or the ZOM, or I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it. The wallet code was open sourced and made available for the first time. And now we have third parties that are picking up that code and using it within their code base. Gemini, one of the most highly regulated exchanges in the world, announced support for shielded withdrawals. The ECC owners donated ownership of the company to a new 501c3 not-for-profit called Bootstrap. Made significant progress with Halo, which we're going to talk about, and Halo 2, which we're going to talk about on this with some of the questions. We announced new partnerships like the one that we have with the Ethereum Foundation. The ZEC stored and shielded pools hit an all-time high. So it's now over 700,000 ZEC. And it's kind of a parabolic trajectory if you look at the amount of ZEC being now added to those pools. We have new docs, we have new support like Coinbase USD, and I could go on and on and on. So there was a lot that happened. Thank you to the community for all your support this year. We're really looking forward to a lot of great things that we have coming up for next year as well. So let's jump into the questions. We're going to start with some of the technical questions that came in around our roadmap and Halo 2. The first, there's a couple questions related to Halo 2. When's it going to come? And are there any solutions related to trusted setup? And Stephen, our Vice President of Engineering, is going to take this question. Stephen.
All right. Thank you, Josh. Yeah, a couple things also to point out in terms of 2020. We had two network upgrades that activated, Heartwood and Canopy. So those were super successful. Specifically around Halo 2 and trusted setups. Great timing for the question. The first phase of Halo 2 deployment in Zcash, we've codenamed Pollard. And Pollard will introduce the first shielded transfer capability within Zcash that does not require a trusted setup. We have purposely made the functionality of Pollard very similar to Sapling, but the proving system will leverage the Halo 2 stack, including a new cycle of elliptic curves. Together, we refer to as the POSTA curves, the Polis Investa curves. They are a new cryptographic construct, and that's kind of the result of our continued work to ensure that Zcash benefits as much as possible from groundbreaking crypto that improve both security and performance. Our goal with Pollard is to have it ready as a candidate for deployment in the first half of 2021, and that's what we're working toward.
Even thank you. The next question, also related to Halo 2, is, are there any sacrifices in terms of performance that Halo 2 implementation would bring? We've asked Sean from our engineering team to address this question.
Hi there. Yeah, so we've been working hard from the beginning of the development of Halo 2 to ensure that we could solve scalability challenges and remove the trusted setup without compromising in any meaningful way on performance. And we believe that computationally will be competitive and in some respects even superior to the existing protocol. And although transactions will get a bit larger, the increase isn't substantial. And crucially, the aggregation capabilities of Halo 2 will allow us to sidestep those increases in transaction size when we begin to develop a more scalable version of Zcash.
Sean, thank you. Another question related to Halo 2 came in. It says, it looks like Halo 2 will be implemented on-chain in this 3.25 block reward era. Will it be possible for Zcash to process greater than 1,000 transactions per second with today's block size? Dara, would you take this one?
Yeah, so there's a short-term answer to this question and there's a longer-term answer. Our first deployment of Halo 2 in Pollard, that won't use recursive proving. So that's to reduce technical risk. We're doing this incrementally, just introducing the proving system, and then recursive proving will be later. And Halo 2 has larger individual proofs than Grok 16. So as Sean said, there's going to be a moderate increase in size for equivalent transactions in the short term. And we'll be making other changes to mitigate that. So the short-term capacity will probably remain below 10 transactions per second. But the longer-term reason to introduce Halo 2, besides eliminating the trusted setup, is to support recursive proofs. So that will support scaling because you'll be able to aggregate transactions. So you could imagine an exchange, for example, or a light wallet provider aggregating all of the transactions it's going to send and submitting them as a single aggregate. And once we do that, I mean, assuming everything goes well and that gets deployed, the blocks could be very much smaller, even though the transaction capacity is possibly hundreds or even thousands of times greater, because the verification cost wouldn't be dependent on the number of transactions, it would only be dependent on the number of aggregates.
Thank you. Just a reminder for those watching, if you have additional questions, please go to Slido and log those now. We're watching that list and we'll get to as many as we can. So the next question has to do with our work with the Ethereum community. Stephen, what's the progress on interoperability with Ethereum?
Yeah, so there's been a good bit of activity on Interop in general, but with Ethereum in particular, a couple of our ecosystem partners, Ren and TokenSoft, they both announced and deployed wrapped versions of ZEC on Ethereum. Ren token is called RenZEC, and for TokenSoft, it's WZEC. And those are deployed today. Also, kind of bouncing back to Halo for a moment, Halo 2, back in July, we received a grant from the Ethereum Foundation to continue working on Halo 2 in conjunction with some of the Ethereum Foundation cryptographers. As part of that grant, we identified 3 milestones that we were going to deliver. We've already delivered on 2 of those, with the third anticipated to be by the end of the year. In the new year, we'll be again working with the Ethereum Foundation to explore a second phase of that grant with additional deliverables. And the overall goal with the effort is, one, to advance Halo, of course, but then and then the more chains and layer 1 systems we have that use Halo, the better off we'll be. But 2, our goal with Halo is actually make it accessible to the wider proof ecosystem as a standard for recursive composition. And that opens up so many advantages for Interop. If you can achieve that, there's some interesting possibilities for chain Interop where each chain can prove the other chains. Basically a proof coming off another chain can be verified or validated on a subsequent chain. So we're really excited about the possibilities for a more direct integration. We have, again, the wrapped ZEC available on Ethereum today.
Thank you, Stephen. This next question is for Nathan, our CTO. And the question is, will there be a stable coin on Zcash? And if yes, would it be possible for it to be done on chain, or will we have to use a side chain? Nathan.
Yeah, so it is quite feasible for there to be a stablecoin on Zcash in the future if that's what people want and we have the right features in place. So the most feasible path for that to happen would be to introduce a feature called user-defined assets. And that is a feature multiple folks are interested in, and there are a variety of options in the design space. ECC created a prototype, Strad, one of our engineers, created a working prototype about 1.5 years ago. And we have a draft zip for a particular design that we're mulling over. The foundation announced on their recent blog post about their 2021 roadmap that they're interested in that feature. And we've also seen some other community members like Matt Longo from Thesis post to our forums saying he wants to show up and work on this kind of feature. So user-defined assets would allow there to be multiple assets in a single shielded pool. So they would all have strong privacy together. And once you have that, it's feasible to have two kinds of stable coins. One could be wrapped tokens coming from another system. So like maybe DAI could be coming over a bridge onto the Zcash network, or another option would be an issuer would be using the user-defined assets feature on Zcash directly. It's much less feasible to have like a complex algorithmic issuance policy stablecoin like Maker or DAI directly on the Zcash chain. So the most likely thing will be bringing in assets over a bridge, or sort of centrally controlled issuers using that Zcash feature. So the UDA feature, it's not fully on ECC's roadmap yet, but we have been looking at it a lot, and we know there's a lot of interest. And we want to make sure that if a design gets put forward for Zcash, that the incentive, sort of like the incentive design of that feature works well for the security and safety of Zcash. And we think that's totally feasible. So we're excited for that.
Nathan, thank you. So the next question in the Zcash community is not without controversy. And the person that never shies away from controversy in our community is Zuko. So we're going to ask Zuko to answer this next question, which is nearly all Zcash transactions are still transparent 4 years after launch. When will T address support finally be deprecated? And then a comment, make Z addresses use mandatory. Zuko.
I like this question. I love controversial, complicated topics that people have strong opinions about. The question of when will T addresses be deprecated is not up to ECC. It's up to the Zcash users base as a whole. Like the way ECC works is we write software and upload it to GitHub where other people can download it from. And we're really good at that. ECC has an amazing ability to write software that does things that have never been possible before in human history and make it production ready and secure and upload that software to GitHub. But we've never run it or forced anyone else to run it. That's always been the independent Zcash users choosing to do that. So the point is, we could make a patch tomorrow that rejects all blocks that contain T addresses, and we could upload that to GitHub. But if we did, nobody would run it. Maybe a few people who are really into it would run it, but they would find themselves on a very small minority chain fork because 90-something% of all Zcash users would keep running the version that supports T addresses. So the first fact is we're not the deciders. We can definitely implement stuff, and we will. But there's a much bigger, more complicated picture of whether the thing becomes the standard in the whole ecosystem or not. But the second thing I want to say is the current hybrid architecture with T addresses and Z addresses both woven together into the same chain is great. And the reason why there's those 90% of users that would decline to run that hypothetical patch is because they benefit from the option of choosing either Z addresses or T addresses for their use case. And most of them are exchanges, and they've, with some exceptions, they've chosen T addresses for a variety of reasons. But in general, privacy and transparency are both valuable features. And the current architecture of Zcash offers both at the user's option. I saw a demonstration of this yesterday when this Afghanistan charity called Code to Inspire announced that someone had anonymously donated 150 ZEC to their charity to teach Afghani girls how to code. So the charity, Code to Inspire, had the choice of using a Z address or a T address to receive their donations. And they chose a T address, which meant their donations, how much is getting donated, and the fact that it's getting donated to their charity, that's publicly visible on the blockchain. So when they announced this donation yesterday, they pointed to the Zcash blockchain and said, look, right here, there's 150 ZEC donation to us. And at the same time, the donor had the choice of donating from a T address or a Z address. And the donor chose to donate from a Z address, so nobody knows the donor's identity. They got perfect anonymity, or not perfect, but the best anonymity that anyone has ever deployed in real life before now. So I think that's a great example of how T addresses and Z addresses are friends. And the hybrid architecture allows the users to choose. And that's important because transparency is an important, valuable use some of the time. Another example is proof of reserves protocols. Like if you're holding someone else's money on their behalf because you're a custodian or you're one of those wrapped Zcash gateways, or you're an exchange holding a bunch of other people's money or something, you probably ought to make that fully transparent so everyone in the world can tell how much money you've got and when you move it and stuff like that. So transparency and privacy are both valuable features. The current architecture offers both at the user's discretion, and you can mix and match. So the Code to Inspire charity got transparency, which they wanted, and the donor got privacy, which they wanted, and they both work together with the current hybrid architecture. And it's absolutely feasible. There would be other advantages to upgrading, but we have to upgrade so the new version provides the same kind of functionality that the users currently need in order to get them to come along. So I think that will happen eventually, but it requires meeting their use cases and convincing them to come along before we can do it. The end.
Well done. Thank you.
Send all flames to me.
We're going to move to a different topic around wallets. And as I mentioned at the outset, we have a product team, a world-class product team that has been working on providing the community with wallet code to be able to natively support shielded Zcash, which historically is really, really hard, right? It's hard to create a proof on the mobile device. And this next question has to do with hardware devices. But they've made some significant breakthroughs and delivered some stuff out to the community. The person leading that team is Brad. And we're going to ask Brad to give us an update on hardware wallets. The question is, what's the current status of shielded hardware wallets? I'm specifically referring to Ledger and Ledger Live and the implementation of shielded transactions. Thanks. Brad, will you take that question?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a great question. First off, I know I'm really excited about this too. So as a group, we've been really excited and eager to watch the progress from an organization called Zondax, who've been tasked by the Zcash Foundation via a grant to implement shielded support on the Ledger. So ECC, we've been following their progress closely, coordinating and helping them where we can, specifically in some of the Rust components, some of the protocol components. So the current status of that via Zondax is they've completed their third milestone of their proposal to the foundation, which makes it feature complete on the actual Ledger hardware device to create sapling shielded transactions. So, I mean, that's like a huge breakthrough, huge milestone. But there's a couple challenges left. So the challenge right now for the near future is how do we hook up this, functionality on the hardware device itself into user-friendly user interfaces. So there's some information and also an ask here for you, right? If you're the one who asked this question. The ask is, if you're a Ledger user, I'll presume you are, it's really helpful from Ledger's perspective to hear their customers ask for this, right? They like to know if they're going to put in work to do something like integrate into Ledger Live, which is this step to really make it a complete launch for Ledger. They like to know that they're going to have users as soon as they put forth that effort. So, if you can go out and ask Ledger, say, listen, this group Zondax, who've been in contact with Ledger, they're aware of them. They've delivered a feature I want. Now we need to get it into Ledger Live. So that's one piece. Beyond that, there's other options too. So, my team, we're really interested in watching the progress of this on integrating into features like ZEC Wallet, which is a community wallet. We're also watching what this could look like into integrating into the ECC wallet SDKs sometime in the future. So there's a lot of possibilities with this. I think that we're still a couple of months off at a minimum, but I think there's a lot of a lot of opportunity in the near future.
Thank you, Brad. A question came in the middle after Nathan was talking about stable coins on top of Zcash, and so I'm going to ask him to answer this follow-up question, which is, would stable coins not cannibalize the use of ZEC, similar to a stable coin on Ethereum?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. Although I'm not exactly sure what it means, but I could speculate. It might be talking about the potential for a stablecoin on the Zcash network to be used more than ZEC itself. So there could be like a very large supply, and that might be reminiscent of like billions of dollars worth of tether on Ethereum or Bitcoin. And that is an issue, and that is actually a concern for the safety of the network. So earlier when I mentioned we wanted to make sure a UDA design had good incentive design, one concern is if you have a very large amount of a different asset on the chain, it changes incentives around mining and things of that nature. So there are different design approaches to deal with that. And one thing we can do is sort of observe Ethereum and see what they've learned or what they're working on. One thing we've noticed is that they are working to deploy EIP 1559, which requires fees to be paid in ETH. It remains to be seen how much impact that has or how important that is. And I think there's another part of the question, assuming we've sorted out all of the design stuff and the system is secure, what is the value proposition of ZEC compared to a stable coin? And one interesting thing about this question is that question still applies even if there isn't stable coins on the Zcash network, right? Stable coins exist, they're out there. What is the value proposition of stable coins versus something like ZEC or Bitcoin? And I think that's an open question. I happen to believe that one of the values of the ZEC asset has to do with its issuance schedule and its clear policy about issuance, which leads to people understanding how the supply is created and distributed, and that provides people know what they're getting into with this decentralized system with that. Whereas with a stablecoin, there's always going to be an issuer. The stablecoin is always going to be targeting either a fiat pegged price or some sort of measurement of purchasing power over time. And you either need a complicated algorithm or an organization to manage that for you. And now we start getting back to these questions of who runs that? Is there a potential for abuse? What can go wrong with all of those moving parts? And these are open questions in my mind, and they're great questions to be having. So there's these two pieces, the economic question and also the security of the design for the Zcash network. And those are both important questions moving forward. Zuko.
I have a simplistic view of it, which is that the Zcash coin holders and the Zcash coin supports the network. It makes the Zcash network sustainable long-term and fuels the advancement of our mission to empower everyone with economic freedom. And any other token, a stable coin or wrapped Bitcoins on Zcash or anything like that, it should do that too. It should contribute to the underlying platform and to the advancement of the mission.
Great, thank you.
What I mean is it has to, there should be a way that that token is helping sustain the platform and advancing the mission. It shouldn't just be like benefiting the token holders, but not doing those other two things of sustaining the platform and advancing the mission. If that makes sense.
Makes sense. Thank you both. We're going to shift gears for a little bit into regulation. there's a lot that's been going on this year and moving into next year. We have Jack from our team here that is responsible for our regulatory engagement. And Jack, there's a couple questions for you. This first one, come 2021, South Korea will ban privacy coins. Is there anything that can be done to keep ZEC on the South Korean market?
Right. So the background to this question is that new regulation will come into force in South Korea in March next year, which imposes anti-money laundering obligations on cryptocurrency exchanges. And some of the details of how those rules will be enforced is contained in a separate set of rules, which is called an enforcement decree. And a draft of that was published in early November. The draft enforcement decree included a requirement under Article 13 that exchanges should not, and I'm quoting from a translation here, carry a virtual asset that embodies technology making transmission records unidentifiable when such a virtual asset is transferred from one virtual asset address to another virtual asset address. And that is the source of this concern that South Korea is looking to ban privacy preserving coins like Zcash. So we engaged a local law firm in South Korea to advise us on our options in relation to this. We've submitted an opinion letter in response to the proposed wording of the enforcement decree. And in that letter, we argue that regulation should be technology neutral and based on a risk-based approach. And therefore, instead of regulating privacy preserving technology, which is what this wording would seem to want to do, the focus should be on the risk that is associated with specific crypto assets. Now, we know from the RAND report, which was published earlier this year, that there is very little illicit usage of Zcash for purposes like money laundering or terrorist financing. So we feel that we can make a strong argument that the risk associated with Zcash is low. So first step was to submit that opinion letter in response to these proposals, which we did earlier this week. We now have to wait and see whether any changes are made to the final enforcement decree wording and take it from there. If it appears that the final wording would require that South Korean exchanges delist Zcash, one option would be to seek an interpretive ruling from the regulator stating that Zcash does not fall under Article 13 because, for example, it has the ability to transact using T addresses. But we'll have to wait for the final wording before we know what that next step is. But I would say that you should rest assured that we'll be doing whatever we can to ensure that people in South Korea can continue to buy and sell Zcash on regulated exchanges.
Thanks, Jack. The next question is related to what's happening here in the U.S. What's currently the focus of ECC efforts regarding regulatory regimes in Western democracies? Will we see Zcash, like a Zcash rep in the U.S. Senate to promote privacy?
Well, we do keep an eye on developments in all jurisdictions to the extent that we can. Bear in mind that we're a relatively small team. And certainly, recent developments in the United States over the past few months have been an area of focus for us. We've had meetings with folks at FinCEN, which is the primary anti-money laundering agency in the United States, and we've met with people at the Treasury Department. We've drawn their attention to that RAND report that I mentioned before, and also to a white paper that was published recently by a US law firm, which looked at the anti-money laundering regulation of privacy preserving cryptocurrencies. And that white paper found that regulated entities and exchanges and whatnot can comply with their AML-CFT obligations, their anti-money laundering and prevention of terrorist financing obligations when they're listing assets like Zcash. And that's why exchanges like Gemini and Coinbase are able to list Zcash. So, in addition to that sort of direct engagement, which can be difficult sometimes, getting in contact with the right people or getting the right connections, you also try to multiply our efforts by supporting organizations like Coin Center in the United States, which does great work educating people, policymakers and legislators about this technology and the cryptocurrency sector in general. and also contributing to the work of groups like Global Digital Finance and the Blockchain Association. We've taken part in meetings with congressional staffers on the Hill with a view to making sure that they understand the potential consequences of new regulation. And I think we're seeing good progress there. I would say that we don't generally talk very much publicly about those conversations with policymakers and legislators because it's important to establish trust when we're building those relationships so that they can gain confidence that they can speak openly and honestly with us without fear that information will leak to the media. But we expect that the general theme of privacy will come to the fore over the next few years, over the course of the upcoming Congress. We hope to be able to leverage some of those relationships to highlight the issue of financial privacy, specifically in the context of cryptocurrency and blockchain technology.
Thanks, Jack. The next question is there any initiatives to help with what's happening in Hong Kong, Nigeria, Bulgaria, and other pro-freedom movements? And I'll take this. We don't have any active public initiatives beyond working to ensure Zcash is acceptable to everyone around the world. We are occasionally asked to provide consultation, but we do not disclose any information shared in confidence that could put someone at risk. Similar to some of the comments Jack made about sharing information related to conversations with regulators. The next question is, what's the current status of regulatory and exchange support in Latin America? Andre, who leads our partnerships and business development efforts, is going to take this question. Andre.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for that question, Josh. So Zcash is currently available on several Latin American exchanges, such as Ripio and AirTM, both of which are really focused on serving users in Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, and Venezuela. Additionally, Zcash is available on several top global exchanges like Coinbase, Kraken, OKX, and Huobi, all of which have expanded their presence in Latin America and provide direct conversions for Zcash in that region. Currently, we're not aware of any significant regulatory headwinds in the region, although we understand that Mexico has issued a whitelist of approved cryptocurrencies, and Zcash is currently not on that list. But we've done a lot of research in the region, and we plan to expand on our efforts to grow adoption in Latin America in 2021.
Thanks, Andre. So I just want to note there's been a number of questions related to Zcash, the Zcash price, and what we think about the price and what you think about the price and all kinds of stuff. So if you're not familiar, like we don't we don't comment on the price. That's not what we're focused on. We're really focused on doing the things to garner adoption and interest and education with people that have need for a digital payment system or a digital cash like Zcash is. And we'll continue to focus on that front, but we can't talk about price specifically. There's another question related to community. This one I'll ask Elena, who is our product marketing manager, to take. And the question is, if the ECC cares about building a privacy-focused community, why do so many of the free events that it sponsors still require registration to access?
Hey, Josh, thanks for that question. So I love the way it's phrased. If we care about privacy, then why wouldn't all of our things just be easy to sign up for without any need to register? So I think there's two parts to this question. One is events that we get invited to participate in. So we don't control registration policies for a lot of events that we get invited to participate in. And we work really hard to make sure we're spreading the news and excitement about Zcash to different audiences, right? So we're not just talking to our echo chamber or to our community or to our biggest fans. We want to make sure we're reaching out to people in different protocols and different communities all around the world. So a lot of times that means actually proactively going out to events, and those events have registration policies that are outside of our control. That being said, we do work really hard to make sure that that information is available to as wide an audience as possible without having to sign up or register or disclose any identifying information. A lot of that content you can find on our YouTube channel, which you already know exists because you're watching the ECC live stream. Now, the second part of that question is for our own events. So we've actually experimented with several different strategies, from Jitsi to Zoom to YouTube live streams like this one. And we do require registration for a lot of our community calls, especially our monthly community calls like our gardening clubs, arborist calls, and also zeal calls. And there are a few benefits to having people register. Namely, we can send you reminder emails so you remember when the call is, and we can send you the recordings of the meetings after the fact. Registration, I do a lot of this work, and I'll kind of say registration also really helps to discourage trolls and disruptive behavior. I know we don't like to think about that, but that definitely is a reality of living online. And we've seen if people register, even with an alias, it does discourage disruptive behavior. That being said, I'm always looking for feedback and suggestions. So I've actually sat down and tested calls with Jitsi. There's a program called Whereby. We use Keybase and Signal. And I'm happy to trial and error different products if you have suggestions. And maybe in the future, we can have our community calls that are registration free and have all the other features that we need to make sure we're reaching a wide audience.
Awesome. Hey, Elena, I've got another question for you. Will we see Zcash events in emerging economies, examples being India, Indonesia, Brazil? I would think that the populations there are in need of a private store of value.
Okay, you would think that, wouldn't you, Josh? Okay, so as part of our Canopy activation campaign that we did in 2020, we coordinated with partners all around the world for events just dedicated to Canopy and getting people excited about the halving. Specifically, we did webinars in India, South Korea, Argentina, and Brazil. And we would love to continue these efforts next year. It was so much fun working with CoinDCX in India, Blockchain Academy in Brazil. We worked with a local meetup in Seoul and with RTM, one of our exchange partners in Argentina. And we got a lot out of it. And I think people really like to see messaging in their context, in their cultural context, and also in their language. So it's important to point out there are something like 6 or 7 billion people on Earth, and there's only 30 people at ECC. So these efforts work really well when we can partner with a local and engaged person on the ground. So if you or someone you know is passionate about Zcash and you would like to see more of these efforts in your region, reach out to me and contact me and we can set something up. I'd also like to give a special heartfelt community shout out to the Zcash Spanish language community organizers, spearheaded particularly by a community member called Dimitar. He has set up a Spanish language Telegram channel dedicated to Zcash, as well as translated a whole library of Zcash related content. So thanks for all the work that you do, Dimitar, and we hope to see more Zcashers all around the world participate next year.
Yes, agreed, 100%. Thanks, Elena. There's a couple questions that came in that I'd like DC to take. So DC is ECC's COO. The first question for you, DC, is there are many teams working on electronic P2P cash, Bitcoin Cash, Dash. Is there an opportunity here to gather forces instead of each team working on its own?
Great, thanks, Josh. So coming from a more traditional business background, we have this concept of not just splitting things apart, but bringing them together through what's called M&A, or mergers and acquisitions. And in the blockchain space, we've seen a lot of fragmentation, right? We see forks created all the time where projects basically break into multiple pieces. And I think it's high time that we see the opposite of that in the blockchain space and see a confluence of projects coming together for mutual benefit. So we haven't seen any of these yet. I do think we will soon. And when I think about M&A from a Zcash perspective, I think about, well, what projects are out there that would be complementary? We actually spend quite a bit of time talking to and working with folks from other projects, both formally, as we have with the Ethereum Foundation, and also informally. And we maintain good open communication channels with all sorts of different projects. There are some that I think are notable because of their differentiation. So I'm going to mention Decred here as a project that came from folks that were working on Bitcoin a long time ago. They built their own implementation in Golang, which was a big step up from the original Bitcoin D and C++. And they've also introduced, and have now been running on mainnet, a novel consensus that is a combination of proof of work and proof of stake. And I think that's quite interesting. It blends those two paradigms together in a pretty fascinating way, both from a security and an economics perspective. Similarly, we spent some time talking with the folks at Celo. Celo is a proof of stake fork of Ethereum. It is its own separate layer one, but this is really interesting. Ethereum 2 has recently launched with a pretty different approach to proof of stake that is sharded and allows for an arbitrary large number of validators. Celo, by contrast, is proof of stake. It launched before Ethereum 2 did, but has a pretty small hard cap on the number of validators that can participate. But Celo's team, in addition to doing some really interesting engineering work, also has a pretty interesting go-to-market strategy that takes a mobile-first approach to find people where they are. So these are interesting, and we look to projects like those for collaboration. In terms of Dash and BCH specifically, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about those two projects. BCH recently had a fork that didn't go very well and resulted in some additional fragmentation. And Dash, I think, has really made some waves for marketing, but not much from an engineering perspective. But that said, we do see folks coming to us from other projects. Maybe their project didn't go the way it expected. We've seen people come talk to us from other projects when things went sideways with their own projects. So that's a perfect segue for me to talk about some open positions that we have at the ECC today. We're presently looking for a couple of open recs. One is for someone to be responsible for developer relations and also documentation. So this role is really designed for somebody who is outgoing and extroverted, but also technical. If you like working with and coding against APIs, creating documentation and engaging with developers and drawing them into a community at a technical level, then this is the position for you. We're also looking for a senior DevOps engineer. So if you live and breathe Kubernetes and Ansible and Terraform and other DevOpsy type stuff, if you like infrastructure as code and you like scaling things up and instrumenting them, this is the role for you. And you can read more about both of these open positions at electriccoin.co/jobs. And I encourage you to take a look and apply. Finally, there was another question around, does ECC have an internship program? And at this time, we do not have a formal internship program, but I would encourage you, if you are interested in this space, if you're aligned with the mission of ECC, and if you feel like you would be a good fit working with this team, if you want to, it's okay to send us a note to jobs@electriccoin.co, even if your skill set isn't a direct match for one of the recs that we have open. Even if you're junior and don't have a lot of experience, we want to hear from you. We want to see what you have to offer and what we might be able to teach you.
Thanks,
Back to you,
DC.
Josh.
Yep, I have another question for you. It's like one of my favorite questions in here, and it came from Mind Zcash. So Mind Zcash is on the governing body of the ZOMG and was looking at various projects to fund. There's a significant chunk of money in there already. And his question is, if there was a wish list for things that the ZOMG should fund, what top 5 things would be on it? What are your top 5 things, DC?
Sure. So wallets. the Zcash Foundation did some great work funding Zec Wallet early, and I think that has really helped make it easier for folks to send shielded transactions. Separately, I think we want to see shielded hardware wallet support, and we know that the work with Zondex has been making good progress there. And we got a little visitor here who's showed up early from homeschool. Stephen, you had some other suggestions as well. Could you jump in? I've been called into homeschool duty here.
Sure, no problem. I could hear my homeschool crew in the background. I was hoping they'd be finished with what they were doing before I got called on speaking in. But yeah, so first of all, great question. And if you look at the zcashomg.org website, there's a section called What We Fund. So generally speaking, that's an incredible list. Like, I think we would love to see everything on that list. But in terms of top 5, yeah, DC mentioned wallets. Shielded hardware wallet support. Zcash Foundation funded Zondex to do some work on Ledger. There's some additional work there to kind of, again, hook up a good UI to that, so it's a little bit more usable. There's obviously other hardware wallets out there as well that we would love to see shielded Zcash support on. The continuation of wallets throughout the ecosystem in general. Zec Wallet, which has been instrumental to the growth in Zcash. ECC released our own reference wallets earlier this year. There's already been a couple of wallets released built on that. We'd love to see continued funding for those efforts. Network layer privacy, and I kind of hopped out there when I saw the question and looked at the list of things that the ZOMG would like to fund, and just pulled off the top few. But network layer privacy would be great to invest in. State channels. We've been working on something called transparent Zcash extensions for quite a while. We've got some a partner in Bolt Labs lined up to take advantage of that with their ZK channels product, and we love to see funding for state channel development. And then also, it's kind of a housekeeping item, but like audits in particular, like we spend a tremendous amount of money every year on audits, and we're glad to do it. And in fact, we won't release anything unless it has been thoroughly audited. So, for example, we mentioned Pollard a little bit earlier in the live stream, and we're teeing up at least 3 different audits for Pollard, for example. So going forward, funding audits for the ecosystem would be great. So. Thanks,
Stephen. From a growth perspective, by the way, would love to see more partners to help engage in adoption, education, and growth initiatives around the world. Like we're this small little team here in the US, largely focused on growth. And as Elena mentioned, within the community, we need more boots on the ground. So I would personally love to see more of that as well. Nathan, there's a question that came back during the live stream that if you would take would be great. The question is wrapped Bitcoin on Zcash a risk to the private store value narrative for Zec?
Yes. So is it a risk? No, I don't think so, for a few reasons. So first of all, a shielded pool, the privacy benefit of a shielded pool grows with a network effect depending on how much usage it has. And if it's supporting multiple assets, all of the assets involved will benefit. So if there's a shielded pool and a bunch of wrapped Bitcoin comes to it, that's enhancing the privacy of Zec. So this is an example of like a win-win situation that's good for everyone. Yeah, so I think that's a key thing. That's the key answer there.
Thanks, Nathan. A question came in about proof of stake, and I'm trying to find it back in my list. But basically, are there any plans for Zcash Ethereum? Stephen, can you take this one?
Sure. And I always refer to Zuko's standard answer. We're happy to see Ethereum experimenting with proof of stake and moving toward it in ETH 2.0. And our plan is to, you know, we're very innovative, but we're also very conservative. So we want to, and we do work with Ethereum obviously very closely on a number of fronts, but we want to kind of see how proof of stake, you know, evolves and rolls out in Ethereum, and learn what we can from their deployment as we evaluate proof of stake and other options for future deployments of Zcash down the road.
Okay, let me look in the queue. May just take one more. Let me see. There's a question on what is your view on gaining adoption as a private store of value as an important segue into becoming private digital cash? Zuko, what are your thoughts on this one?
I like that framing. It echoes what I always think is that features that improve store of value uses, like the fact that Nathan referred to earlier, that Zcash has a very simple, clear, limited issuance schedule, identical to Bitcoin's, that lets everyone understand the supply side. And then the demand side, there's speculation and the price and all that, which we don't touch, but then there's usefulness, right? Zcash coins, if you own one, you can do something with it today, which is transact it or donate it to the Afghani girls' school or whatever privately. Those are things that I think make it more attractive as a store of value, but I think it being more attractive as a store of value makes it more attractive as a medium of exchange and vice versa. So the specific question was, shall we stop over at store of value on the way to medium of exchange? And I think that's a valid sort of thought. And also in the other direction, I think it's valid to say that the more widely accepted it is for coffee, the better of a store of value it is to investors. And so I really think it's an iterative, like, yin yang thing that you can't really separate. That's my attitude.
Yep. Thank you. So team, broader Zcash team, thank you for spending this time with us. Thank you for some really terrific questions. Please keep asking us, hit us up on Twitter or on the forums, wherever you find us. We really appreciate the support. Really looking forward to next year. This year was hard. Like I said at the beginning, like we got a lot done. The community got a lot done, and I think we're just getting started. So 2021 is looking to be pretty exciting. Thanks again for your time. We'll talk to you all soon. Have a great holiday. Bye-bye.
Happy holidays.
Bye. Looking forward to working on deploying Halo.
Take care.
And we're out.